Okay, so here we are again, the greater than good. And this guest of mine coming on has been somebody that I've been wanting to introduce for a long time, ever since I started working with them. And in order for us to kind of get down to it, we got to give you a backstory. But just from an introduction standpoint, Jon Reyes is based in New York and is somebody that I came across thanks to the internet, thanks to Instagram, when I was helpless, searching, struggling to find somebody that would look at a project of mine and help me articulate it in a better way. He's an editor extraordinaire, and that little project of mine is about to be published in October of 2023. And I'm very thrilled, and I think he's thrilled too. So without further ado, Jon Reyes. Jon, how's it going?
Hi, good. Just here in New York, going through the beautiful uh, time of spring. So lots of allergies, but finally the weather is looking up, and that is always the best part of New York.
Yeah, man, it's nothing gets better than spring and summer in New York.
Yeah, it's pretty wonderful. There's so many things to do, so I'm excited. Like, bring it.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. So, you and I, obviously, we've been working together for a while, and the project that we're talking about is I'll Be the Moon, migrant child story, which I was just showing you, the first real proof, tangible proof of
Gorgeous.
this guy. And I'm going to frame that one because that's incredible to me. I'm still over the moon at what is transpiring all around us. But it definitely started with a small idea during COVID, a draft that I wrote. You took it and just pulled a lot out in me and challenged me the way nobody really has before. And one of the things that I said to you was that, and when I thanked you for shepherding this project, and that sparked a really cool conversation that you and I had that I know we're going to talk about
Yeah.
second here. But just give us a little bit about your background from an editor standpoint.
Yeah, I started I went to college wanting to be in the record industry and the music industry, and I interned all through my college experience. Um, and then kind of figured out, I'm like, okay, the music label thing is not probably the best thing for me. So I went into music publishing, and I worked at a performing rights organization called ASCAP. I was there for a while. And then I read this book by Greg Lawrence called Jackie as Editor. And it was about Jackie Kennedy Onassis's journey during her second, like, sort of, reintroduction to the world when she became an editor. And something about reading those pages and reading about the process of making books, it just, like, really called to me. It just really, it just made me realize, I was like, this is what I need to be doing. This is sort of where I want to be. At that time, a friend of mine was like, why you look for opportunities in publishing. I'm starting this events company, come and work with me while you do that. And that was a detour that then, led to tons of other jobs at, working at branding management companies, doing marketing, and working with some small businesses in New York, in fitness. And it was just like a whirlwind. And then finally, I got my foot in the door at Penguin Random House as a publicity assistant. The woman who hired me, her name is Amanda Walker, definitely took a chance on me. She took a chance on the Black horse. And I was there for a year and a half. And, and it just became more than obvious that I just really wasn't my strongest as a publicist. And once I started sort of really digging in and trying to figure out, okay, like, what is it that I want to do, but also what is it that I can bring forth as a service to anyone. And I had a really, like, hard conversation with myself and realized that it was editing. A lot of my fear at that time about it was thinking about 2016 and all of the books and all of the ideas and IP that was acquired in the spring of 2016, imagining a different world a year from then. Um, so the volatile nature of the world sort of kept me from really like embracing that part of it, because the job was very scary. It almost felt like editors had to be an oracle of some sort, and that is very intimidating. So, but when push came to shove, I'm like, okay, I just can't fight it anymore. Like, this is what I want to do. And was lucky enough, because I was searching for opportunities to like get my foot in the door, because editorial is a very apprentice based craft, and you have to have someone sort of mentor you. So I came across Tessera Editorial, and they have a mentorship program that right now I think it's at a 12th cohort. It might be higher than that now, but I was the 4th cohort, and Chris Sedesser, who is the executive editor at Source Books, I believe it's Bloom. Anyway, so she sort of shepherds all of these kids and all of these sort of aspiring editors and gives them like a crash course on everything: copy editing, proofreading, what it is to do a reader's report, a dev edit. Like, it's just like crash course of like 8 weeks. And then depending on the kind of level of work you're turning in, and your performance, she invites you to be part of the cohort, and then you just start building your client list from that. And that's kind of how it got started. It coincided with the quarantine, and I felt very, very strong about not squandering that opportunity, and I really just like put my head down into the work. Then I got an internship at Source Books, and sort of learn more there, and just and that's just how I've sort of kept this editing thing going. And
Awesome.
it's been
A journey.
it's been a journey, and right now it's sort of like the best period of my life. I think a lot of my floating around was really, really just about me embracing what I was good at, and how and having the confidence to sort of perform and bring it to the world.
I can tell you, the whole editing, when you say it was scary and intimidating, from a writer's standpoint, when I started my career as a writer, I was really a reporter, a sports writer. And I was just trying to, same thing, floating around, getting my foot in the door, writing anything that they would throw my way. I mean, you just give a dog a bone, right? Go out and fetch it and see what sticks, see what story you can find. And that definitely helped a lot. But I definitely remember at the afternoon paper, our deadline was in the morning. And back in those days, they typeset everything right then and there. I mean, it's immediate publication. So you have to go in there and with your good stuff, because if you don't have it, then that editor is going to chop it up. And literally, they would take an X-Acto knife and chop it up as they paginated the newspaper. And it's almost like going to confession. You had to bring your best stuff. I should have learned more before I encountered you, but two different types of writing. But I can understand how intimidating it was for the other side of the fence. But go a little bit deeper into that intimidation and that scary factor. Was it because here now I have to be Mr. Grammar and no rules and all of that stuff? Or was it just the industry in general that was just scary?
It was a little bit of everything. I think I have, so, putting this out in the world has always been sort of, I don't know, I've always weighed on it, but I went through a good 35 years of my life not being diagnosed with ADHD. And, that is interesting for anyone, but it definitely shapes your relationship that you have with academics and anything that has to do with your executive function. And I think I always did have a very, very heavy complex about that. So the grammar part was always a real challenge for me, which is when I started doing freelance editing. Actually, before that, when I was at my mentorship, and Krista, my mentor, came to me, she's like, during the copy edit sort of week or 2 weeks that we were working on copy edits, she's like, so we know that you're not a copy editor. And okay, I was like, drag me. But then, but I also took, I was also like in the space of like mental space of like not accepting those limitations. So like I really put my head down, really like went hard on, the Chicago manual of style and really honed those skills. Um, so yes, that grammar part was also very, very intimidating. And also a lot of the industry is also really intimidating. you know, I mean, there's just really like no way to like talk about it without being really upfront. The American publishing industry has a class and race problem.
Mm.
And it could be tied, like what came first, the chicken or the egg.
Yeah.
But it does. I think there's a big challenge there. And it's really hard for a BIPOC person to sort of break through that world, for a multitude of reasons that I think that they're very long, but they are challenges. And it's also a very competitive field. Editors are fighting to buy what they want, fighting to buy what they think is going to propel an imprint's list forward, fighting to buy what they think is going to be the next best thing. And a lot of that is very tied to who you are as a person. And it's really hard to break through that, no matter how good you are at your job, no matter how good of an editor you are. There's a lot of other stuff that you sort of have to like bring to the table in order to break through. So yeah, that's kind of like a little bit of what was sort of keeping me from embracing that, like, this is who I am and this is what I want to do for the
Yeah.
world.
I think by the same token, I think that's what keeps a lot of good writers away.
Right.
That intimidation factor and the query letters, and who do I go to? Do I do an agent? Do I query a publishing house? I don't know anybody, or I'm unpublished. And certainly the industry has created opportunity for more of the vanity press side and hybrids and
Yeah.
Publishers of that nature, the small independent presses are listening, I think, a lot more because they've got their ears closer to the ground or their finger on the pulse of what's happening when it comes to people of color, different voices, different stories, whether it be LGBT or Hispanics like you and I, and or Latinos, and such as just any kind of story that deserves to be told. It all comes down to this big factory, it seems, to a faceless email address or PO box that you got to send something to, only to never hear from them ever again.
Yeah.
And it's hard, and so I think there's also that barrier on the writing side of the fence as well. One of these days they'll figure it out where we can kind of come together and coexist. But in your case, you found opportunity. And talk a little bit about that moment where you landed that gig at Penguin.
That, God, man, that was really like a moment. I remember getting the call. They're like, yeah, we'd like to make an offer. And I remember I got really teary-eyed and I was like, oh my God, like everything that I've gone through, and to like get to this point, like my foot is literally in the door now. And it was really exciting. And I think the biggest thing that I learned while I was in the building at Penguin Random House was how much I absolutely love the book production process.
Mm-hmm.
I freaking love it. The joy that I feel and felt speaking to a managing editor who, during a cocktail, like during a happy hour, telling me that she was so excited that she cut a book from 351 to 350 words, and how many trees she saved because of that. Like, oh my, I was like, this is minutia that I freaking love. And
Yeah.
helping the marketers sort of figure out like how to, like what's an angle that they could use for their work. And when an editor would come to me like, can you do a publicity read on this, and help me really sell this to the editorial board, like that kind of stuff for me was like anything that was building inward facing, like the building, like that was my thing. That was like where I shined the most. And then also realizing that like my colleagues, I really respected my colleagues, because it was finally like a kinship, like coming together, like, oh, these are the people that like I really should have been working with for a very long time. And I didn't really have direction. And I think that was the biggest thing that I learned, was that you need to have some sort of direction. You need to commit yourself to something that you see yourself doing 5 years from that moment, or a year from that moment. Because if you don't, what does tend to happen is there's no ends to the mean, and every day is filled with means. So you have to sort of have be very present about what those means are and where you want to end up. And I didn't really have that. And I think that's where I really faltered.
Well, that's interesting though. And I know you're going to get into that, but just think about what was just said, right? I mean, for anybody watching this, I mean, yeah, every day is filled with means, and you have to almost be centered or anchored,
Yeah.
to have the foresight to reach those means, right? Or to hit our goals. And for me, I have to have a list. I just have to literally have a sheet of paper of a checklist of things. And I think a lot of us are like that. But then here you are. And I guess at the time, unbeknownst to you, you had ADD.
Yeah. It was
Right?
it was very difficult to sort of be in a fast-paced environment that you really enjoyed being in, and not really understanding like why the information wasn't flowing in your brain the way that it needed to. And that was really hard. And I mean, and it absolutely led to burnout. And that's where I kind of was by the time I left. And yeah, it just really sucks. I mean, and then, but it's so weird. Like knowledge really is power. Because then as soon as I really like figured out like what was happening, it's become a very different outlook on how I process information, how I sort of encounter it, what I need to do. I have to bullet journal everything. I have to plan everything. I have to, Friday nights I have to like look at my calendar for the next week, and it's just kind of knowing the things that you need to do in order to move in this very neurotypical world.
Yeah.
Ultimately is what it is. And I think I learned a lot from that experience, and just having the knowledge. And I'm 100% a different professional than I was when I first walked in the door 5 years ago.
So I would say almost methodical is the approach that you kind of take now.
Yeah, very methodical, because my brain is very wired to be very on top of things when there's a crisis. I'm built for I don't know, I forgot what the word is. Spontaneous stuff.
Yeah,
Like
spontaneity.
I'm wired for that. So my issue and problem will never be that I can't be spontaneous, or that I can't deal with any spontaneous situation. That's just how I'm hardwired. What I'm not hardwired for is the methodical stuff, and that I really need to be very extra mindful about. And I think that was sort of the shift.
Well, I mean, to the point to where in working with me, I think you were so methodical, and I've joked about this at, public speaking things that I've done, or just people that I've talked to about the project, namely like my wife and my brothers and stuff. But is that, it's not like, from a development standpoint, it's not like we were going for grammar. People think of editors in a different way, and certainly that's absolutely important. The greatest editors know when to break the rules of grammar and get away with it.
Yeah.
And but in shepherding this project, and I think shepherding is the right word, it's like you pulled out to the syllable. It wasn't to the sentence, man. It was to the syllable, to where these words needed to flow in the right way. And I don't think we're ever finished with that process.
Never.
We've made some changes on the fly here lately here, but in great ways. But I think people need to understand that the way you approached this specific project was so methodical that it wasn't just, okay, here's the text now and it sounds great and I'm going to wash my hands. I mean, you've taken such complete ownership of it. I mean, I can hire you as my agent, for God's sakes.
And I remember telling you this when we did have a conversation. You did tell me that for the first time, and it was wonderful to hear, because that's always been like a really standing critique throughout my professional life, was take ownership, manage up, all of these things, keep us on task. And that was always a real struggle for me. So to hear you say that really meant a lot. But ultimately, I think for me, when I was helping you through all of this, I think it came from the mindset of wanting to really empower you to really stand firm on what your original idea was. Mm-hmm. And I have these conversations with the authors all the time. And more than once I've been like, I think your original vision was totally on the money, was totally on point, totally like in the pocket. I don't think you need to doubt yourself at this juncture. And I think so having gone through everything that I have gone through, I think I really just want to bring that to an author, because there's already so many variables that really like mess with an author's head. I don't think the editing process needs to be part of those variables. I think it should be part of it in the sense of the author walking away better than when they came in. And I don't know, in different ways, like maybe, figuring out what their crutches are, or figuring out how to work collaboratively with an editor. They had never been able to do that before. Like, I think those are things that I think every author should walk away from.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that, because yes, there are a lot of different variables that will screw with us, including our own selves. I mean, half the times it's us shooting ourselves in the foot and doubting ourselves and stuff like that. But one of the criteria I had,
the call is always coming from inside the house, like bar none.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I know I told you, and I know I told Mofs, our wonderful illustrator, who just did a wonderful job. I mean, I can't see her first one, and just nailed it, just hit it right on the park. But you played a huge part in that as well. And when people think of editing, they don't think of, oh, but that's the art. You know what I mean? Like, my requirement or my ask was, guys, pretend you're the ones that wrote it. Take that kind of ownership with it. This is all our project now. And I think you've certainly done that, because you've had incredible input into, you're not just a guy who relays information to an art department, right? And talks to me first, but you also provide, some important input that maybe I didn't think about, or maybe the artist didn't think about. And so you've really taken the task of putting everything in its right place and making sure that it's out there. And when did I first give you the first draft? I mean, that was in 23. Was it in 21?
I think so. Yeah, I think it was, because then I checked in with you. I think we did it like February. I think we finished, and I think you spent some time with it, shopping it around. And then I
Rejected.
checked in with you. You gave me a status that nothing really was happening. I was really surprised by it. Then I sent it to Angela Engel, the publisher at Collective Book Studio. And then she like, so I think it was 2021. Yeah. Yeah. That was,
Yeah, it seems like forever in a day.
yeah, it's a
You
lot.
know?
I mean, and another thing that that I know for a fact that many editors do know, that's really hard to put to practice. It's understanding that you're the guest in the house and it's really not your project. So it's always walking that really fine line of really caring passionately, but also being very well aware and also reminding yourself of what the original vision from the author was. And that's what you're really anchoring.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fair. Yeah, that's a fair
and,
assessment. Yeah.
yeah, and getting buy-in from people as much as possible, because there might be some things that the publisher wants that I know I'm gonna have to come to you with and really get you to buy in. And I think that's another um that's another component of the job that really comes naturally to me, because whenever I do bring something, it's because I have all the information. And also that just comes from having done some journalism and really like asking the questions that need to be asked so that you can, again, relay the information correctly and in the best way possible, and always working to that yes, which is really everything.
So here's the thing, you mentioned the word guest, right? But not every house wants a guest.
Yeah, I mean,
There are
that's
certain
hard.
types of guests, you know what I'm saying? Because, a guy like me will crash the joint and throw a party and order, all kinds of stuff and mess up your couches and all that. But like, who do you not want to work with? Who do you not want to have a guest? What is? I mean, I think in our sense, this has been awesome, but it's not always going to be like that, right? And so, moving forward,
Yeah,
what do you
yeah.
look?
I think so. I'll be honest. I'm at this stage where I say yes to as many things as possible, because when I live in New York and so I need all the money that I can get my hands on. So, but that has also afforded me many opportunities. And in fact, like coming to the realization that I could do children's books came through sort of just that thing where Angela came to me. She's like, we really love this whoever you are manuscript. What do you think about it? And being like, cool, yeah, I love it, let's do this. And so I think for me, it's as long as an author or a publisher has like a clear vision of what they want, I think that's good, because it gives you a benchmark, and that is the most important thing. So you know um some authors have a might nitpick more on some things, um and that's fine. Like that's really not a thing to be bothered by. So, but it's very easy to, again, what's the means to the end. So it's very easy to get distracted by those means. But point is, really honestly, as long as there's a vision, I think for me, I'm like, let's do this. Let's have fun. And that's the other thing too for me. It's like we live in a world where we really have to work to live. And I just don't believe it needs to be more miserable than it should.
Yeah, amen to
like,
that.
like we can, I think like we can make a concerted effort to make it as enjoyable as possible. Being fully aware that work is work, which is work. It's fine. But it doesn't have to be this thing we don't look forward to, at least for a little bit throughout the day. Yeah. So again, I don't know. I wouldn't. I don't have that sort of marker of like who I wouldn't work with.
Right. No, I get it. I mean, I think I'll give you from my standpoint here. Um, I know that there are certain stories that I'll never write again, uh,
Right.
that have been published, past projects, right? And it's not that I feel that those were bad projects. They were the right project at that time. But
Right.
I remember I was at an elementary school and I uttered the words, no more children's books, to the librarian, who happens to be my cousin. So it was safe.
Wow.
But it was just a bad experience. I thought, what the heck am I doing, man? You know, I mean, like, what kind of an impact is this making on their lives right now? And I don't know, maybe it was the time. This was probably around the right, 2016, 2017, where we're undergoing a lot of change in our country and our society and all of that stuff. So I get that. And from that standpoint, and I just thought, okay, what am I doing? All right, is it going to be about pancakes? I mean, what's happening here? And I'm
Yeah.
mentioning that because of a previous project that I published, but I just made a decision from then on out that I was going to try and work on projects that were going to be more impactful, more in a serious way, to get people to think, primarily kids.
Mhm.
Uh, I wanted to tell better stories. You always want to strive for better, but I
Right.
can't get back to the days where, hey, we're looking for a coffee table book that, we want to sell at Kohl's or something like that.
Yeah.
We could sell 100,000 units of that and break even. It's like, I'm not interested in that. It's got to go back to basics, to where it's not about the money, and it's about the passion, it's about the impact, it's about the message. And you absolutely saw that. So, thanks for keeping me on that path, because I think this project here, when it finally comes out in October, I think it's going to be a winner in its own right, regardless of what sales look like or anything like that. That it's going to be out there is a
Yeah.
huge, huge win
Yeah. I
for
mean, it's already getting good reception. And I think ultimately, it's it's a mom and a daughter sort of walking through the border to get to the other side, because there's already family on the other side. And I think that's just very real. I think, as much as sometimes it is about economic stability, it's also about just like wanting to have your family together. And I
yeah.
think all of those things combined um, make immigration um, a really well-rounded issue that can't be policed in absolutes.
It's
Um,
not plug and play.
yeah, and
You
I
can't
think
come up with something and just solve the problem like you would a math problem.
yeah, and I think it's also realizing and knowing that, I mean, immigration is sort of just it's part of what Earth is, and it's never going to stop. So there has to be some way that you can get public buy-in and also kind of lean into it. I think, yeah. So anyway, so I just really loved the story so much immediately as soon as it started to take shape. And again, I don't recall what the first draft that you sent me looked like. But I do remember thinking, I'm like, I'm really not changing much. I'm really just, I think the message was already here. The intent was already here. It was just like molding from then on.
Well, I think the hardest thing, was coming up with the title, because we didn't go with the original title that I had penned in the first
Right,
draft.
which I totally forgot what it was. Yeah, and and also transparency here. The subtitle was also something I spent a lot of time on. Um, but also just realizing, you just get to the root of it, and that's in itself very radical. And the subtitle, I think is just perfect, like just like
Yeah,
pitch perfect.
I overthought
Um,
it.
I think, but that's what I think a lot when you're in the process, it is totally normal for anyone to sort of really come in and overthink it. Um, but again, my lovely, beautiful brain has a very, very quick way of just sort of stepping back and being like, okay, fine, let's do another way. So let me be an outsider looking in, and I can totally do that. And that's when I think we came to the consensus of what the subtitle really should be.
Wow.
Um, yeah. So it's been a pleasure working with you too. So, and I
No, that's been
tell
awesome.
you that as many times as possible because um I think a lot of it just came from you being very sure of your vision, trusting, um, and we all sort of had this accountability. And I think that also, really anchored us in this process.
Yeah, no, and this is not going to be the last time. I mean, I'm already putting some ideas together. So just prepare and keep with the mentality of always saying yes. Um,
Yeah.
but we just got some pretty good news. I mean, this is going into Spanish. I mean, so it's obviously written in English, but now it's going to be
Yeah.
translated. You're going to be working on that too.
Feels like a very natural sort of like progression. And that I also just love, I think, um, riding those waves when they come, those organic waves, when like things feel organic, like ride that wave and just like
Yeah.
really just catch it, because they're far and few in between. And also on that same token, there's always those organic moments in any of the most difficult projects. There are those organic moments, and you just kind of just like, again, catch the wave and ride it until you can't ride it anymore.
Yeah. I mean, going back to music and your first love, your first passion, what you felt you wanted to do at first, that happens all the time in a studio. I mean, somebody could hit a note, but it kind of sounded interesting. Can you do that again and expand on that? And now we've got like, oh, wait a minute, we've got something different here. And it changed
Yeah.
a song, but that was I call them happy coincidences. And that happened a lot throughout this project. So, Jon, for anybody who wants to aspire to be an editor or even to be an author and work with somebody like you, I mean, like, what would be the one thing you would tell them to start, if they wanted to maybe follow in your footsteps?
I think I learned this from my boyfriend. We all have the network, tap into it, and you have it. And even in the line of work of being in publishing, many times we encounter authors who, their pitches, I have the network, and then when the time comes, there's hesitancy to tap into it. And if you really just want something, you have to just really put yourself out there. You really just have to make yourself vulnerable. Even the best writers, everyone's favorite writer, 90% of them have a writer's group. They read their stuff out loud. They open themselves up to critique. And I think editors aren't any different. And I think that's just what you have to do. You have to either find community or tap into the community you already have. And network and community are completely different. Community are the people who are going to be there with you, giving you guidance and not necessarily opportunities, but that's also super important. And then your network can come through for you when you need it to.
Yeah.
But community is, I think, like the most important thing. And, the first thing I like ask an author, aspiring author, is, do you belong to any writers groups? That's it. That's where it starts. That's where the connections start. That's where oh, I know this agent who knows that agent who is into this kind of stuff. And that is the start of a journey.
Absolutely. Very well said. Jon, hey, man, you're a busy dude, so I'll let you go now. But thank you very much for taking the time and sharing your story. And more to come, my friend.
Thank you. Really, thanks for the opportunity. Thank you,
Thank
Philip.
you. All right. Have a great day.